Welcome, everyone. My name is Julia Toothaker, and I am the career coach and strategist behind Ride the Tide Collective, the podcast, a career-focused podcast that helps ambitious professionals strategize and take action to control their career in a way that aligns with their personality and their values. This season, I am embracing the collective part of my company name, and I've invited various coaches and experts to talk about topics that impact career development and career decisions. My guest for this episode is actually a friend of mine, and I love when this gets to happen because I love being able to support really strong, amazing women, and Kriste is no exception. We actually met in a mastermind a couple of years ago, and I feel like just instantly clicked anytime that we got into a group together. Kriste and I have just a very similar personality type and approach to life. And so I'm so excited to have her on the podcast. And I want to do a little introduction because one of the things that I love about having Kriste on is she is a doctor. And I feel like for me as a coach, having people who are truly experts and educated in their fields is so, so important. So Kriste Cook, MD, is a pediatrician with over a decade of experience practicing medicine in a very busy clinic. She is also a mom of two strong-willed children and knows how challenging the life of a parent can be. Kriste has a passion for using her expertise in neuroscience, child development, and pediatric medicine in order to help parents create a more peaceful and effective parenting journey. Don't we all want that? In her free time, she loves to spend time with family, travel, and write. So if you didn't catch on from that, we are talking about parenting in this episode, and we're going through all sorts of topics. Kriste, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I love talking about parenting.
Yes, yes. And for those who don't know, I am a parent. I have a son at the time of this recording who is about 5.5. So I have a little bit of experience in this journey, but we're going to talk about all different stages of life and things like that. And we're just going to start right out of the gate. And I want to start kind of at the beginning of the parenting journey, because I feel like this is such an important topic, especially now with the climate of inflation and whether or not people can own a home. Finances is such a big conversation right now. And so not that any of these are going to play into your answer, but what do you think is the biggest challenge for parents who work full time and decide that they want to have kids?
Certainly the financial aspect is important, but really, I think time management is number one.
Why do you say that?
Yeah. So before you have kids, even if you're in a committed relationship, you still kind of get to do your own thing, right? Well, now you have another child that has its own schedule, has its own needs that all need to get met on top of all of the things that you are doing as a person and in your career.
Yeah. I feel like too, as a woman, and I'm making generalizations, but I'm going to say it as a woman, I feel like it changes your time even more, even if you have a supportive partner. Like I have an amazingly supportive partner, but to manage the career aspect and the mom aspect, I feel like they always fight against each other.
And I think, too, as moms, we have that a little bit added. And again, I'm generalizing here. We have that added demon of mom guilt, because if we're happy in our career, oh my gosh, we're not spending time with our child. But if we're spending time with our child, now our career is suffering. And there's this whole idea that you can have a work-life balance. And I am here to tell you, it does not exist. Don't strive for a work-life balance. It's a sliding scale.
Oh, I love that. I love that you said that because you know this about me, and I think most of my audience is like, I'm very ambitious in whatever I've done. And so even the choice to have kids for me was really hard. Like the choice for me really came down to my husband is an amazing dad. And I knew that he was going to be an amazing dad, and I wanted him to have children. But for me, I was like, I mean, I could probably take this or leave it,
Yeah.
you know? And
Yeah.
it was partially because I wanted a career. I'm an introvert. I wanted my own time. And exactly what you were saying in the beginning, I didn't want to have to be beholden to this other person that I'm now responsible for. And I am sure somebody listening to this is like, Julia, seriously, that's how you feel about being a parent. Look, I love my child. Don't mistake me at all. Like, I love my kid with every breath in my body, but there's this whole other side to it that I think people, women especially, don't talk about. And it's just that internal impact. It comes out as guilt. I
Mhm.
think it's wanting time for yourself and not feeling like you can do it.
But the most interesting aspect about that to me is that if you are not the best version of yourself, how are you supposed to give your best to your children?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. And that's
Yeah.
a conversation that I feel like isn't had
Right.
enough. Like, women are not talking about that, and men too. I mean, I know we tend to focus on women a lot, but I don't think that we focus on men enough either in terms of what they need to be successful dads and
Right.
what was modeled to them versus who they are versus who they want to be as a father. Like, I'm
Right.
watching my husband go through that journey right now, and it's amazing, but it's also really hard
Mhm.
because there's no resources for
Right.
him out there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about like stages, stages of development, because there's like common stages of development. What do you feel like are the major turning points that parents need to think about in their child's development?
Okay. So the first one that smacks every single parent in the face is toddlerhood. And toddlerhood really starts at 12 months of age.
Really?
Yeah, it does.
Oh, I
It
thought it
does.
started at
Mhm.
2.
No, no. So, you
Oh.
know, we call it the terrible twos when kids start acting up, but kids can start acting kind of like little jerks way earlier than 2 years old. And a lot of times I have families in my practice when they come in for that 12-month-old healthy checkup, they're kind of blindsided because they went from having a child who slept and ate whatever they gave them and maybe didn't move a whole lot. Now they've got a kid that's running around, starting to talk, having their own opinions. That's a really big transition for a lot of parents. And
Mm.
one of the misconceptions I think that parents have before they become parents is like it's all sunshine and rainbows. And it's not. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of bodily fluids,
Ugh, yes.
and these are little people with their own opinions and their own agendas. And so
Right.
really toddlerhood is that first big slap in the face, I feel like.
Yes, yes. I can attest to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I feel like too, you don't know the transition is happening
Mhm.
until you're in it
Yeah.
and you're like, what just happened right now?
Right. Yeah.
It's like all of the
Absolutely.
sudden things shift, and
Mhm.
then your time and your energy management shifts,
Yeah.
especially when you're trying to balance a career. Like, if both parents are working and you've got a toddler, like, you're worn out from being at work all day, and then you come home and this like tiny monster just like wants and needs all of your time and attention. Like,
Mhm.
no wonder we're all exhausted. Like, come
Right.
on.
Right. And if you don't talk about needs and expectations with your partner, you're going to create some conflict big time.
Yes, yes. One of the things that we figured out early on, and my husband and I are both introverts, but I would say I need more alone time than he
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
He can function pretty well without it. And I realized that I needed like a transition period
Mhm.
between work
Mhm.
and like tiny human slash family. So
Yeah.
when I was working full time, the commute actually sufficed for
Yep.
that enough for
Mhm.
me that I was okay. But now I work from home, and I work out of my house. And so the commute is, downstairs to upstairs.
Right.
And I've had to communicate to my son when I go upstairs, like, hey, I I need a break. Like I need a transition period. So I'm gonna go take a break. And then when I'm done, I will come back out and we'll have dinner, we'll have whatever the time schedule is.
Yeah.
But I've been really good about trying to communicate that to him so that he understands that I need that time
Sure.
versus not saying anything and just
Sure.
shutting the door on him and being like,
Right.
don't talk to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great to have those conversations because it really is priming the brain for future development. A 5-year-old, even if you say, hey, mommy needs 15 minutes, they may come pounding on the door anyway, just because that's where they are at their stage of life. But really having that communication just sets the groundwork for brain development.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit. You talked about time management. Now my kid is not in this stage of life, so I don't know what this is like, but I know as we get into kind of the 7 to teen stage,
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of activities, there's a lot of stuff happening.
Yes.
What is your advice for parents again? And I'm speaking mostly to parents who work full time because I
Sure.
feel like that's just a different space and that's more my audience anyway.
Sure.
But, parents who are working full time and then all of the sudden the kids want to be involved or the parents want their kids involved.
Mhm.
And now you're working, then you got to go sit on a field somewhere or in a gym or how do you manage all of that? Because that feels exhausting to
Yes.
me.
Yes. So couple of things that are important in the management of that. Number one is if you are in a relationship with somebody else, you need to have regular sit downs about the upcoming schedule. My husband and I do this typically on Sunday evenings when the kids are kind of calmed down and we pull up our calendars and we go through our week. If something abruptly changes, my husband is back in the corporate world and he has foreign clients. Sometimes nighttime meetings come up last minute. We let each other know those changes as soon as we can. So last week, my husband needed to be on a call with clients from Japan at 6 o'clock in the evening. Instead of waiting till I got home from work, he texted me as soon as he found out. So having that is really helpful for time management, having good effective communication, making it a point to sit down regularly to talk about the schedules. It's also important to figure out who is doing what parenting duty. So I
Mm.
take my daughter to dance on Wednesdays. My husband takes my daughter to swim on Thursdays. My husband takes my son to baseball. I take my son to this. Knowing who is going to take the child where at what time is really helpful. Otherwise, as partners, you can start to get resentful of each other.
Right.
Right. Yep.
Right.
Another really important thing to understand as a parent, and this again, it kind of goes along with the mom guilt, you don't have to attend every single baseball game. You don't. Your child will not grow up and on his 21st birthday say, hey, mom, remember that time when I was 9 and you missed that one baseball game? They won't, I promise you. You don't have to run yourself ragged. And the other thing, too, is to keep in mind don't overextend your kids. They don't have to have an activity every single day. And please make sure you are not forcing them into an activity that they don't enjoy.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Kristen, there's so much to unpack here. So much. Okay, first of all, I have to put in support for the weekly meeting. My husband and I started that a couple of years ago, and what a game changer that was for everyone. It went from this, what are you doing today? I don't know, what are you doing today?
Yes.
To we know each other's schedules. We also have a joint calendar
Mhm.
in Google so that we see what's going on. And because I own my own business, I put kind of blocks when I have calls or like right now we're recording a podcast that's in the schedule.
Yep. Mhm.
because it determines, what they need to do or where they need to be. And I am going to tell you, for couples out there, if you're struggling with the calendar and communication, just starting with a meeting like this, I've recommended this to clients before too.
Mm,
Such a game changer because you just know now where everybody is
mm.
and what's going on. And to your point, identifying who's good at what things or who
Yeah.
needs to do what things in
Mm,
the parenting journey and not feeling guilty about that. And I'm totally speaking to moms right now. And also not martyring yourself for your
yes.
partner as a mom. I have seen that happen where it's like, oh, but they're doing this, so I need to do that. I need to do all of this because they're doing this. It's like, no, like you have to take care of yourself too, but you have to just communicate what those needs
Yeah.
are versus running yourself ragged in the process.
Yeah. Absolutely. Mhm.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. What else were we talking about? Oh, the activities piece.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I think this is such a big deal. And I think there's a combination of, I think some kids do need to be in activities just for like an energy management thing. And I
Sure.
think that's, amazing. But really listening to your kid around what they want to do, what they're enjoying, giving them options to try different things, I think is so, so important. And I feel good about parents that are kind of coming up right now, who are a little bit more controlled
Yeah.
in the past.
Mhm.
I feel like they're a little bit more, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Than maybe our parents were.
Absolutely. Well, one of the key aspects of parenting that I always try to promote is that you have to parent the child you have, not the one you want. You know, if your child doesn't like football, don't force them to play. And I think I'm going to give you an example real quick from my life. So my daughter does dance. She is currently in hip hop. And for dance parents, you understand this. The dance calendar is like all year, and then there's summer. So at our dance studio, we pay for the entire season up front. Well, I signed up my daughter for ballet and tap and hip hop. And after about 6 classes or so, she started really resisting going to ballet and tap. And we sat down and we had a brief conversation. And she says, Mommy, I don't like it. I don't want to do it anymore. And that was hard for me because I was a dancer when I was younger. I recognized all the benefits that ballet has. And it really took a lot for me to say, you know what, sweetie, we're not doing this anymore. I know I paid for it. I know I think it's good for you, but you're telling me you don't like it, and we're going to stop. And it's really important to understand that because your child is brave enough to say, I don't like this activity, it doesn't make them a quitter, because a
Yes.
lot of parents have that mentality. And your child's not a quitter. And it's not that they don't have drive or persistence,
Right.
but gosh, let's give them some credit for being able to communicate their wants and needs and dislikes.
Well, and for you creating an environment where they feel like they can come to you and say that,
Right.
because how many kids end up being afraid to go to their parents and say, I don't want to do this
Right.
anymore. Also, side note, I was a dancer too.
Oh,
I did not know we had that in common.
we can't get off on that sidetrack.
I know we can't get off of that. But I think that's such a good example of listening to your child and making sure that, that bravery to come to you and say, I really don't like that. I can't, when I look back on my childhood, I can't even imagine
No,
saying something like that to my
no.
parents because they were the parents that would have said, we already paid for it and you're committed and you're going to finish it out.
Right. And my parents would have done the same exact thing.
Yeah.
But I
And
think we do what we know until we know better. And really, what is the whole goal of parenting? One of the things that I think is important, and I'm going to encourage your listeners to do, is to create a family mission statement.
yes,
Yeah.
I love this idea. And okay, let's just go into actions. So, as part of the episodes for this season, there are 3 actions that I want every guest to talk about. And I know that this was one of the ones that you wanted to talk about.
Mhm.
And I love this. It creates so much clarity as like a couple and a family. So go explain in more detail what this looks like.
So anybody that works in corporate America is familiar with the mission statement, right? It's essentially the organization explaining who they are, what they stand for, their goals, their values. I encourage families to develop their own mission statements. And it really kind of helps focus. It helps remind everybody why they are a family in the first place. Let me give you a quick example. So, our family's mission statement is in our home, we respect the values of kindness, compassion, and listening. Open, honest conversations are always welcome, as is the healthy expression of emotions. Our goal as parents is not to punish our child, but rather use effective disciplinary methods that help our children grow into happy, successful adults.
Nice. I
Yeah.
love
And
that.
then whenever something comes up that kind of blows up in our face, we go back to that mission statement and be like, okay, yes, this poopy thing happened. How can we respond to it in a way that aligns with our values and our goals?
Yes, I love that. And I think too, even for younger kids, the more that you talk about that, like I'm just envisioning that for us, because we actually don't have a family mission statement, but I feel like for who my kid is,
Uh-huh.
that would actually be really helpful for him, because that's something that we can refer to and go, hey, remember our mission statement. This is what we do. We do, I think the closest thing we do is expectations.
Sure.
And so we tried to get rid of like rules, like we tried to get rid of like hard and fast language. And so we
Yeah.
talk about what are the expectations for whatever we're doing. And so we talk about what those expectations are. And
Right.
that's helped like keep
Sure.
him like, oh yes, that's right. These are the expectations when I'm doing this. These are the expectations when I'm doing that. But I love kind of the more holistic,
Yeah.
bigger picture piece of that, because then he can hold us accountable as well, which I think
Absolutely.
is
That is so
really good.
important. It's building life skills.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
And it's also, you said this really early in the conversation. These are tiny humans, and I call my kid tiny human all the time. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's really a reminder that yes, they're a child and there are certain things that, we're here to protect them from and all of that. But they're still human and they still have their own personality and their own thoughts in their own way. And, again, the toddler stage, my kid's 5.5 right now, and he is very much like, I don't want to do it your way. I want to do it my way.
Right. Right.
And
And
I'm
it's
like, great.
yeah, and it's important to understand that the human brain doesn't fully develop until the mid-20s. So we cannot expect our kids to think like us or to act like us. And it's our
Mhm.
responsibility to guide that development and help them learn the appropriate ways, but we can't expect them just to know it.
Yes. I will tell you, like full transparency, we are in the middle of that right now. My husband and I think, and we only have one child. So I feel like the parenting style for one child looks very different than when you have more than one.
Mhm.
But we have to constantly remind each other he's not an adult.
Right.
He's not a teenager. He
Mhm.
is 5,
Yeah.
5.5. And even though there are things that he does that appears to be much more mature for his age,
Mhm.
there shouldn't be an expectation for him to show up at a certain level
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
things. And I think because Danny and I just the way that Danny and I are, I think sometimes, again, I'm a little more high achieving. And so I have this idea of like, oh, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Well, he's 5. He's not going
Right.
to do that. And it's this constant reminder. And when we do our weekly meetings, we talk about that. We
Yeah.
talk about like, okay, what went well in parenting this week and
Mhm.
what could we have done different, and we try
Sure.
to talk about those things to keep them top of mind so that we remember he is still a tiny human.
Yep. And it is very important for our kids to watch us make mistakes own those mistakes and explain how we could do things differently.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. That has also been a learning for us,
Yeah.
is owning up to things that has been so hard for both
Oh,
of
yeah.
us as parents.
It is, but you know what? It's so empowering when you can actually apologize to your child when you messed up.
Yeah. Yeah. And they take it so well, honest.
Do.
My kid does. Every kid's
Yeah.
different, but I don't know that he quite gets it yet.
Yeah.
But the fact that I can apologize and he gives me a hug and he's like, it's okay, that to me, at least he's seeing that I can apologize to him and it's not kind of the iron fist of parenting.
Right. Right. Well, every time you have an interaction like that, you're strengthening the connection in the brain that says, okay, this is how I should act.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
One thing I want to go back to, sorry, I'm just, as we're talking, things just come
Yeah.
up for me
Yeah.
because this is such a prevalent topic. When we're talking about scheduling, again, one thing I want to share that we've done that's been really helpful, that I think will help for the parents and specifically moms that have that mom guilt.
Mhm.
I've had to shift from a quantity to quality mindset. And
Mhm.
so now what I actually do is we plan time in the calendar. Like, I plan specific time that I am going to hang out with him. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean time doesn't happen outside of that. It
Right.
just means that my brain, because of how I operate in the world, I
Yeah.
know, Carter and I are going to spend this time together and this is what we're going to do.
Mhm.
And it sounds a little ridiculous because it's like you're overscheduling, you're planning too much. Da, da, da. And it's for me because my brain has to switch
Yeah.
for my personality type and how I operate in the world. That's the way that I need to function. My husband does not need that. He
Right.
can very naturally just like play with Carter and do whatever. I have to be doing something really
Yeah.
specific with him.
Mhm.
And oh my gosh, that has been a game changer, I think, for
Sure.
both of us, because he
Yeah.
gets attentive quality
Yeah.
time versus me being like, my brain has not switched to hanging
Right.
out with you. And now I'm not fully present. And now I
Sure.
feel bad and you can feel it. Do you know what like, does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think you just need to know yourself. And like for me, I'm like your husband. I don't need that. I kind of do my thing mentally. I don't need to necessarily write it down. But there are people who would greatly benefit from writing it on their calendars. This is my time with my child.
Mm-hmm.
The other important thing though with the calendar, where are you scheduling time for yourself? And it
Yes.
doesn't have to be a big chunk of time, but you have to make sure you make time for yourself. So, one of the things that I do, I love to exercise. I'm an exercise fanatic. I'd work out 2 hours a day if I could. I know that sounds insane, but I schedule my workouts on our family calendar. And everybody knows, okay, mommy's going downstairs to our home gym during this time. If you need something, it better be important. And that is my time for me. And initially, I felt a lot of guilt about it. But I will tell you, I have become a much more present, engaged mother because I take that time for myself.
Yes. Yes, that's so important. Okay, I feel like this leads into the second action, which we've mentioned already, but I want to go a
Yeah,
little bit more in depth to
sure,
help people understand what to do, because I feel like that's going to be the question. So the
sure.
family business meeting, this is like the
Uh,
weekly meeting.
yes.
So walk us through in a little bit more depth, like what
Mhm.
should that look like if somebody wanted to start today?
Yep. So it depends on the age of your child. If you have really young kids, less than, I don't know, 4 or 5, don't expect them to participate. Welcome their participation, but expect them to be like in and out, in and out, in and out. And that's totally fine. It's important to go through um, events of the upcoming week. All right, who's got a meeting at what time? Who's got dance at this time? If one of the kids gets sick, who's going to stay home from work? Those kind of general things. We do a couple of different type of family meetings. So the scheduling meeting is really just me and my husband because my kids aren't super into, they think it's boring. They're not really engaged in it. They just want us to take them to where they need to go, where they need to go. They don't really care what time it is. They just want to get there. So my husband and I have that meeting on our own. We are not great about having weekly family meetings, but anytime that a specific situation comes up, I say we need to have a family meeting. And then it kind of depends on what it is. The important thing is not necessarily the overall structure, it's that everybody has a chance to talk. Everybody listens when one person is talking, and then everybody's allowed to give their opinions.
I love that. I
Because
love
we
it. I
don't
think that's
we don't want to talk over our kids. We don't want to talk for our kids. We want to give them a voice because let's face it, when they're a grown up, if we haven't taught them how to have a voice, they're not just going to magically develop that skill.
right, right. I think that's so important, especially at the younger years to develop trust.
Yes.
Also, I feel like there's this idea, and I think this is a little more antiquated, but there's this idea that just because you're their parent, they automatically have to respect you. And that's not the case. I think, trust has to be built, respect has to be built. They have to see you being vulnerable as a parent. They have to see you interested in who they are and what they want. And I feel like that structure, even if it's done every couple of weeks or even once a month,
Right.
still allows for that level of transparency and vulnerability. I think that's amazing.
Right. Well, and it's a good time. It's a good opportunity for just to check in with everybody. How's it going? Are we aligned with our family mission statement? Are our actions supporting that mission statement?
Yeah.
Um,
Can I add something to that?
yeah.
I think this is also important for families that can't or don't do family meals on a regular basis. Because I'll give you two examples. One, the family that's involved in a lot of things, and y'all just are not getting together, to have a meal because everybody's schedule is so off. But also, in our house, we actually don't eat together all the time, and it's because we're together all day. And so we don't like, for us, the mealtime historically has been a time for everybody to come together, reconnect, especially dinner at the end of the night and all of that. Well, we're together all day, in some capacity, we're together all day and communication is happening and we're there. So we actually treat mealtime as more of an individual time, which in a house, we don't know if Carter's introvert or extrovert, but Danny and I are introverts. So for us, it's actually a really nice time to just kind of decompress. We eat, we focus on that. And that, I'm going to tell you, that's hard for some people because it's very outside of the norm. But then having a really intentional conversation at a time when everybody's good, at their height, their good energy and all of that, I think that's such a better way for us to connect than to assume it's going to happen over a meal or something like that.
Well, and the other thing too is you got to take into account everybody's temperament, right? Like maybe not everybody wants to eat dinner at 6 o'clock at night. Maybe they're not hungry at 6 o'clock at night. And the great thing about family meetings is it doesn't matter how you structure it, when you do it, as long as everyone in the family is on board. My family meetings are probably going to look way different than your family meetings, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's also important to know that give your kids the opportunity to call their own family meeting if they need something,
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah. Yep.
That's so good. Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to remember that because I feel like my kid would be like, family meeting.
Yeah. And then again, you're building these connections in the brain. It empowers them to speak up. It gives them a voice, and it helps them understand that the adults in their life are actually listening to them, which builds that trust, which is so important.
Yes, I love that. Okay, here's the thing too, for anyone listening, anything that we're talking about today is not revolutionary. Like this isn't one of those things where I feel like, oh my gosh, this is going to change the way that we operate. I have to do this really big like mental switch. That's part of why I wanted Kristen to come on, because you are so practical and so just like, what is the easiest thing that we can do in the situation that we're in? And I feel like these first two actions, especially for full-time working parents, these are the easiest things to incorporate that aren't going to take out a lot. And you're probably already doing it in some
Yeah.
fashion.
Mhm.
It's just thinking a little more intentionally about it to make sure that, everybody's on board and everything's being communicated well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's, as busy working parents, you've got to keep it simple. You've got to keep it, proactive. And it's got to be quick because, life is busy.
Yeah. The other thing I'm going to add into this too, because I worked with a client on this and it was like revolutionary for them, is meal planning.
Mhm.
And it's not even that everything has to be like fully planned, but adding that to the calendar. This particular client, for her older kids, was a game changer.
Yep.
And it took out this element of like constant questioning that
Yep.
was happening
Yeah.
because everything was up on the fridge. Even if it was like, don't know, leftover, whatever, it was still
Right.
there.
Yeah.
And it was such a big deal. So even
Yeah.
from that, like add that into it, and I can guarantee whoever
Yeah.
does the primary cooking
Yeah.
will love it
Yeah.
because they won't ask you 10,000 questions every
Yeah.
day.
So in our family, we actually have two calendars. We've got a calendar on the phone. We actually have a whiteboard calendar. We've got a weekly one and a monthly one. And that's where our dinners go. Our dinners always go on the weekly calendar. The one caveat I will have to say though is you have got to be conscious of your child's food choices. A lot of kids are picky eaters and they're not going to want to eat the salmon and the broccoli and whatnot. Don't force them to eat that. But again, during a family meeting, hey kids, what do you think you want for dinner this week? Let's talk about it.
Yes. Yes. Okay. We could go off on a
Oh
total
yeah.
tangent just talking about food. So I'm
Yeah.
not going to do that. But I will add to this, and this was something that we did that was so helpful and I don't think is very common. So I don't do any of the cooking in our family. My husband does all the cooking. And for a long time, we shared the meal planning process together. And then we shared like the shopping process. So either we both went together or like I would build a list and he would go, or like we would build a list and I would go, something like that. And I think it was about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, I was like, I hate doing all of this.
Mhm.
I don't care what we eat. You
Mhm.
know what I will eat and what I won't eat. I don't want to go shopping. I don't like doing it. I have too many questions. Like I don't care.
Mhm. Yeah.
and and he ended up taking ownership
Uh-huh.
completely of the food,
Yeah.
to the point where I would say most days I have no idea like what food we have
Yeah.
available in our
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
And I know that there are going to be people listening that are like, Julia, you're ridiculous. I can't believe you don't cook. I can't believe this. I can't believe that. I don't care. I don't like doing it. He likes doing it. It does not stress him out. He gets out of the house to go shopping. He goes by himself most weeks and he
Mhm.
gets what he wants. I don't know how to pick out produce. That is not my gift in life. He is so good at it. He does all of those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to not feel guilty about it because I was like, oh, I'm a mom, I'm a wife. I should do this. I should
Yeah.
want to do this. No, it
Yeah.
is the worst thing. And
Mhm.
so my point in saying that is when we're talking about who's responsible for things
Yeah.
throughout the week, like I had to communicate that to him. I spent way too long
Mhm.
being like, I have to be a part of this. We're a team. We
Mhm.
have to. We don't.
Yeah.
He
No.
takes care of all of it.
Who says? Who says? Another thing moms need to do, and dads too, stop shooting all over yourself.
Yes.
Stop it. Stop it. Who says you should do something? You either want to do it or you don't want to do it. And if you don't want to do it and you have to do it anyway, then get it done. In our
Yes.
house, it's so funny that you mentioned this because my husband frequently tells me to get out of his kitchen. He also
Yes.
does the majority of the cooking. A couple other things that have really helped us as parents that both work. We do a meal delivery service for ourselves,
Ooh,
and
yes.
we have started doing grocery delivery. It is a
Oh.
game changer. It is a game changer. It was hard for me initially because I'm like, I don't want to pay somebody to deliver my food to my house, but I actually spend less money because now I don't just buy random stuff at the grocery store. It's all, I don't have a chance for those random purchases because I bought it all ahead of time.
Yes. Okay. This brings up a point I do want to make because I feel like it's important for working parents. If
Yeah.
you are in a financial place to do so, outsource things.
Yes, yes, yes. We have a dog walker. We have a cleaning lady. We get our food delivered. Make it easy on yourself. If I could find somebody to wash all our laundry, I would. But outsourcing is amazing, amazing. And don't feel guilty for not doing those tasks yourself.
Yes. Yes. 100%. And I want to go back to the shoulding because this was something again a couple years ago. Can you tell a couple years ago, Danny and I had a really big revelation. Everything happened a couple years ago. This is what COVID did for us though. I mean, it really made us think about things in a different way because everything had to slow down, right? And so it opened up space for us to have a lot of these conversations. And we went through this process of why do you believe that?
Mhm.
So anytime one of us would be like, oh, we should do this, we should do that, or it needs to be this way, it needs to be that way, we will either stop ourselves or stop the other one and go, why do you think that? Where
Yeah,
is that coming from?
right.
Is that something that has been established between the two of us, or is that something from growing up? Is that some societal thing?
Right.
And does that serve our family
Yeah.
well?
Amazing. Absolutely. Everybody should do the same thing. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go on to the third action because you and I can talk for so
All day.
long.
All day. Mhm.
Okay. So we put down kind of journaling and reflecting. Can you go into
Yeah.
what that looks like?
Yeah. So if you are able, if you are in the family planning stages, say you don't have any kids yet, it's really important to get clear about why you want to have a family in the first place. What's your goals? What's your intentions? And if and be honest with yourself. If you want to have kids because you want someone to love you, maybe get a puppy instead. I mean, you have to be clear about your intentions. And you also need to understand that life is not going to go as planned. You know, I loved the idea of going to my kid's baseball games when he got old enough to play baseball. But you know what? Baseball games in the middle of July are miserable. It's hot, it's sweaty, it's humid, there's bugs everywhere, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and give yourself the grace to know that. And journaling is a great way to kind of look at your expectations and how is this going to play out in real life? And
Mm-hmm.
then it's also a great way to reflect on yourself as a parent. Write down the ways you messed up, write down the ways you can do better in the future. um and it doesn't have to take a long time. You don't have to sit and write for an hour.
Yeah.
it, the other nice thing about journaling is you can always go back to it. If your kid did something really, really cute and you want to remember it, write it down.
Yeah. Okay, one tip I have for journaling because I always want to talk about this because I have a friend who is more like verbal auditory
Mhm.
than writing. So it's really hard for her to just like sit and write. It's hard for me to actually sit and write. Even though I'm an introvert,
Yeah.
I am an external processor.
Huh.
And so to sit and write sometimes write about my feelings
Yeah.
is sometimes very difficult.
Yeah.
It's easier for me to speak it out. If
Yeah.
that's you, then use a speech to text. You can do that in Word and you can do it in Google Docs. And so do it that way. If you need to talk it out, if that's easier for you, do it that way so that you still have a record of it in your own voice,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily writing if that's something that either you don't love doing, or in some cases, maybe you don't have time
Right.
to do,
Right.
because that's something you could do, on a commute or something like that.
Absolutely. I think we do need to kind of expand the idea of journaling. Journaling does, like you said, does not have to be limited to writing. It can
Right.
involve drawing. It can
Yes.
involve scrapbooking. I mean, whatever it takes to help you kind of decompress and process can be an
Yes.
effective journaling technique.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. Kristen, this has been such a good conversation. And I know we covered a lot of topics, but parenting is it's a lot of
Hard.
topics. And we probably could have done like 5 episodes just on
Yeah.
parenting.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
I hope that the parents who are listening, who are, working full time, managing kids, those who want to be parents, I hope that this was valuable for you and you got some really tangible information from it. I know that that was our goal going into this, to make sure that it wasn't just let's talk about all the problems that we have, because
Mhm.
that happens enough. We all talk about the problems. Now we need to talk about what are some solutions? How can we help each other? How can we evolve as parents and be the best version of ourselves as parents and as humans? So I feel like we did that in this conversation, and I appreciate you coming on. Can you tell everybody where they can connect with you? Where can they find you?
Sure. So, the most amazing thing that anybody who is listening can do is to follow me on TikTok. I am
Yes.
at Mom Doc Talk, MomDocTalk. I post funny videos, I post informative videos. I love talking about parenting. That's my passion. That is the best place to find me. I have an Instagram account. I'm not on it very often, I got to be honest. You can find me on Facebook, but really the money's in TikTok right now.
All right. And I will leave a link to that in the blog post for this
Okay.
episode. And I follow Kristen and it is worth it. Let me tell you. Definitely follow her on TikTok. She's hilarious and the stories that she shares are amazing. So highly, highly recommend. Thank you so much, Kristen, for being a guest. I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, I loved it. Thank you so much for having me.